Hello. The Victoria and Albert Museum, generally known as the V&A over here, say they are a family of museums dedicated to the power of creativity. Our mission, they say, is to champion design and creativity in all its forms, advance cultural knowledge, and inspire makers, creators, and innovators everywhere. And they do this by telling the British people that they are total shit. Right, I just thought you'd be interested to know that. I'm granniopteryx. I'm on x.com, YouTube, Rumble and Minds. I'm also on Gab and BitChute, which are accessible in our free speech Starmeropia only through a VPN that pretends it's in another country because they are effectively bound here. Okay, well, I came across this short clip. It's 14 minutes long, but I'm not going to be playing all of it. From the Victoria and Albert Museum. This particular little lecture is supposed to show how fashion evolved between the 1830s and the 1930s. Although in my opinion, they're showing special occasion dresses here, so it doesn't really make all that much sense because special occasion dresses are often out of their own time. However, we know when these dresses were made, and we also know that this lady here loses no opportunity to do Britain down while she's talking about them. I'm going to switch now to a larger version of this so you'll get a better picture. First of all, now I have to be careful about copyright, so I'll be doing a lot of interrupting or saying what she said without actually playing the sound. I'm afraid, I'm just worried about that. We start off with her discussing this dress. Now, I have to, for those of you not interested in fashion, there is a point to me talking about what's going on here. I'm not going to be going into great detail, but this was a wedding dress. And it survived so long because, so far as the curators, the museum know it, it was never worn after the ceremony. It was just packed away. There would have been several reasons for this, but my theory is that what happened, there are no hooks or eyes or buttons on this dress, which means that the lady would have to have been sewn into it by a lady's maid. So it would have made... the finish of that would be a very smooth, as you can see, very close to the body, no pulling. You know, when you've got hooks and eyes, there are always little wrinkles where the hook is catching. None of that. But of course, it's a nuisance to have to get dressed in that. You need your lady's maid to sew you into it. And then it was a wedding dress. So possibly the lady, she got married and then got pregnant soon afterwards, and would have her figure would have changed even if she had maintained her slimness. Now, there's something else for this dress. You notice it's brown with a floral pattern. That's Queen Victoria wore a white dress for her wedding, and that fashion was coming in when this dress was made. But still, especially out in the country where this dress had its wedding, they didn't do that because white would have been sort of just a waste. I mean a waste of fabric. And most brides up till then and for some years afterwards would just wear their best dress for their wedding. And obviously this woman would have had the same idea. It would have been a really nice dress to wear for special occasions. But as I said, she probably didn't get the chance. It just didn't happen. whatever. The fabric is a truly remarkable example of Victorian textile technology. When you look at it like this, it appears that the fabric is some sort of a heavy a woven wool or something like that. It has an appearance of weight, but it isn't. That brown textured look to it is just a print on plain cotton. And the way that they got the floral pattern with such vibrant colours is they printed the brown texture and left spaces for the in the white cotton for the pastel and light colours of the flowers. So it would have been printed up first with the brown, and all those patterns there would have been white spaces, and then it had to be run through the rollers again several times. There would have been a yellow, there would have been a blue, there would have been a red going through, and a black as well. And then the yellow and blue would have combined for the green, probably. But you can see the green has some differences, like there's a pale green and a dark green, which probably means another print run for that as well. And that would need a very high degree of accuracy on the print rollers, and a lot of technology to keep the fabric straight and steady while this was happening. Then there's the tailoring. I'm going to try and get round to the front of the dress now. Here we go. Those chevrons there on the bodice, they're a marvel of the seamstress's art. They not only add interest to the pattern, of course, but they also hold the shape of the dress. And just look at all this smocking here. So and this was all hand sewn, of course. And if you look at this, it's a remarkable piece of combined technology, like that famous Milton Friedman lecture about the pencil, which, I mean, he took the idea of the pencil. I've forgotten the name of the man who came up with the original pencil story, but I have to mention that it wasn't Milton Friedman's invention, but he did quote it. And this is an example of something that comes from all over the world. The fabric from probably from America, the patterns from India, I'll get to that in a moment, and of course the working up, the seamstress work from Britain. This here is quite a remarkable fusion. It's just a wonderful mixture. Actually, you can see a little bit of white round here where the pattern is slightly offset, but that might have been partly deliberate as well, because it makes the colours pop a bit. If you look at this here, that's a sort of English floral pattern, but it's inside an Indian motif. And in India, it was known as a butta pattern. In England, it's called the Paisley pattern. And that's, so let's start. The Paisley pattern was, not unsurprisingly, woven in a Scottish town called Paisley that took to making shawls and wraps and various drapey things in the style of the Indian patterns which were coming into Britain from India. And so but inside this butta is a sort of English, an abstracted English floral pattern that is not Indian. So it's a sort of fusion of the two. You could say it's a great example of the way the British Empire took on foreign cultural icons. They didn't think of such things to be inferior at all. They were only too happy to learn. So they've got these, traditional British, English type floral patterns, and then the Indian butter there. I suppose some idiots might talk about cultural appropriation at this point, but they're wrong. That butter pattern there shows how Britain was prepared to learn and benefit from any culture. And then our charming hostess, I've forgotten her name already, comes out with this. Oh, here we go. Not losing a chance to signal her virtue.
Cottons at this time, both fashion and furnishings. It is a fabric that we now are very aware has a problematic history to it.
Just a minute. When you hear the word problematic, you know there's trouble ahead, don't you? I'll just go back to that.
This is a printed cotton. There was a huge demand for printed cottons at this time, both fashion and furnishings. It is a fabric that we now are very aware has a problematic history to it. So actually the vast majority of the world's cotton around this time had a direct connection with enslaved labour in the US, where this fibre was being cultivated and processed. A lovely object, but with some very difficult histories attached to it.
Okay. She couldn't allow us to look at the beautiful tailoring and the romance of the combination of an Indian motif with English flowers and the homage to Indian culture in this. No, she's got to start talking about American slavery. It's a beautiful piece of highly sophisticated textile printing that was produced on raw cotton fabric, probably from America. Not necessarily, it could have been from India as well, you know, but that's not in her agenda, is it? And then it was printed up in a British textile mill. Now let's talk about British textile mills. That's places where at this time 8-year-old British children were worked for 10 hours a day, forced to crawl under the looms and rollers to clean up old threads or pick up fallen items. In the weaving looms, frequently getting scalped when their hair got caught in the moving parts. And then the dress itself was sewn by seamstresses who were ruining their eyesight stitching by candlelight. You don't need to go to slave labour in America to look for the exploitation that made this dress. But that's how things were in the 19th century. And I'll tell you something, they were a lot better in the 19th century in Britain than they were in other parts of the world. But she just couldn't resist signalling her virtue, could she? I wonder if she'd have said anything when talking about a Persian carpet. I want to show you a piece from a 1922 publication called Carpet and Shawl Weavers in 19th Century Iran by someone called Ahmad Saif. Just a minute, I've got to switch screens now. Okay. In a carpet factory in Kerman, the owner was showing the work of an expert little weaver of 5 years old. They used small children there because their little fingers could deal with the very, very fine threads. So in this carpet factory, the owner was showing the work of an expert little weaver of 5 to a visitor. The visitor asked what the child's daily wage amounted to for such beautiful work. When he heard the small sum, he asked if it was possible for her to live on it. No, of course, was the reply. But she's only an orphan. Just remember, this was 1922, by which time Britain had all sorts of laws about child labour, which started being made in the mid-19th century, shortly after this, or even during the time when that dress was being made. And these laws that Britain came up with insisted on education, time out, and ages when children could and could not work, and how long they could work for at certain ages. Did the narrator say anything about that? No. Or about the fact that almost 100 years later, the carpet factories in Persia had not advanced an inch forward, while in Britain they had. No, let's just talk about slaves in the USA, just to show how virtuous we are. Right, let's get back to the dresses. So now we're going to move on to the next dress, which 622. Let's just get on with that. This is Edwardian, and as you see, the silhouette has completely changed. She talks about some of the lace being handmade and some machine made, and then it was all assembled like pieces of a kit. And she says that this putting it together would have been very labour intensive. Again, she isn't talking about the seamstresses who would have laboured over this in, if they were taking work at home, which often happened, they would have laboured over this in freezing attics or perhaps in noisy, dusty workshops. But no, she doesn't. What she does say is this.
This piece was originally worn by Viscountess Gladstone, and she was the wife of the first Governor-General of the Union of South Africa, which was a colonial role. So another object with a difficult history attached to it.
A difficult history, because it was colonial. This dress was worn by someone who was associated with someone who was in the colonial service. She couldn't resist. Just bringing it down. So let's not look at the frothy, sophisticated work in the dress. Let's just beat ourselves up about colonialism, should we? Not a word about how British society developed and changed. Not a word about the technology, the improvements in technology. Not a word about how Britain went out into the world and instead of imposing British culture on everyone else, as, for instance, you see in the Ottoman Empire, where all those countries that were taken over by it suddenly developed the same dresses, the same writing, the same literature, and the same general artwork. No, the Brits took ideas from everywhere and fused them into their own culture, from textiles to cookery. Not a word about how British life and innovation kept step with each other, like these dresses, like the early Victorian dress and this dress, how everything changed, how the shape of women changed and how society changed. Not a thing about that. Let's go back to that butter pattern, for instance. How long have Indian women been wearing the sari? Well, women of the Indus Valley wore various versions of the sari around 3000 BC, from what we could see. They might not have worn anything on the top, but the basic garment stays the same. And you could look at pictures of Indian women from 400 years ago, and the styles have changed only minimally. Yeah, there are slight differences, but nothing like the differences between, let's go back to, let's see if we can find those dresses again. Nothing like the differences between this dress and this dress, both in the way they were made and the sort of fabrics that were available. So in India, they had beautifully made and sophisticated fabrics, but the society had not progressed in any way. It was basically the same for hundreds of years. These are less than 170 years apart, these dresses. Whereas in India, it just went on for hundreds of years until the Brits came along and shook things up. Yeah, shook things up and completely changed Indian society. And what does this woman go on about? Sorry, I'm hiding her now, but well, she doesn't deserve to be shown. What does this woman go on about? Slavery and colonialism. You're looking at two works of art here. No, let's talk about slavery and colonialism. This in a museum of art and creativity, and all it seems to me is it's become a shrine for telling British people, as I said right at the start, telling British people they're complete shit. Yeah, right. And you wonder why I'm angry. Well, I am angry. Okay, till next time. You can help my channel by subscribing and clicking the notification bell. That's quite important. And by sharing if you're so inclined. Links to my other channels and to donation methods are in the description. But the best way you can help is simply by clicking like and notify. Thank you.